Hello and welcome back to the Bird's Eye View podcast. We are here the morning after Team Canada's World Baseball Classic journey came to an end. I'm your host, Zach Worden, joined as always by Jori Negin-Shecter. And Jori, they were right there. 5-3 loss to this American team that obviously is littered with all-stars and, a couple bounces, one defensive play, and it feels like Canada may have been able to pull this one out.
I'm really not enjoying that we're making a habit of making these day after loss and I'm all sad episodes. I mean, obviously the Blue Jays, what, 6 months ago, not even. No, Canada was right there for this ball game. It looked like they were out of it even. I mean,
Yeah.
for a period there, and then a big swing from Bo Naylor, and suddenly life, and I mean, after that, I mean, I'll be thinking of that seventh inning, man, for the rest of time. Uh, Josh Naylor striking out, tough tournament for him. Tyler O'Neill going down, tough tournament for him, and the hero and Casey unable to scratch across at least one run, just stinks.
Yeah.
And in the end, that was as good a chance as Canada was going to get. Mason Miller is untouchable, and yeah, that's all she wrote for Canada baseball. But man, I mean, you come out of that one, and I mean, you can only dream on, what ifs because it feels like they're so close to something here.
Yeah, I don't want to like sit here and dwell on the loss for too long because at the end of the day, this was a really successful tournament for this team where they advanced out of the pool stage for the first time. They reached this point in the quarterfinal against the American team, where ultimately, kind of like they win their pool and they get kind of hurt for it, right? Where you play the Americans, you have like you the original schedule had the pool A winners playing on Saturday, which would have been good for Canada to get an extra day off, and instead, they're right back at it the day after traveling from Puerto Rico to Houston. So, kind of tough from that perspective, but. I think when you look at this game, obviously we talked about it before in our preview where we're talking they gotta keep the ball in the strike zone and they gotta keep the ball in the yard, and I think for the most part they did a good job of doing that. I think they actually did a pretty good job as a pitching staff of keeping the ball in the infield. They only gave up one extra base hit to this U.S. lineup, which was an Aaron Judge double in the first inning, and I think of that kind of that fateful third inning where two runs come across and it's that chopper to Toro at third that he isn't able to get to and throw to first in time, and then the very next play Alex Bregman hits a play and Toro, like fine diving play, and just gets up and sails the throw with two outs and two runs come in to score, and and two runs ends up kind of being the difference at the end of the day. And I mean, even if you want to look at the sixth inning where Philippe Amont comes in and, you know, a walk and a couple hits and all of a sudden, there's another two runs. So it just kind of was like on the margins of this game where, some of the batted ball luck went to the Americans, and that was all they needed to kind of escape with this one.
Yeah, I think escape is a good word because it feels like Canada hung around, right?
Yeah.
And listen, the United States, they're running out. I mean, listen to this lineup. I mean, Bobby Witt Jr., Bryce Harper, Aaron Judge, Kyle Schwarber, Alex. Like, it's a murderer's row. Canada's best player doesn't even start on the U.S. probably. Like, it's just a matter of fact. They were not gonna win on talent alone, but they did what they had to do, and I think the pitching that you pointed to as well. I mean, you know, Tugboat, just a
Yeah. Electric.
what a story! Like that guy is going to be so critical for Team Canada if he can just stay healthy and commit to the program. Like there's so much on the horizon for this team. What I mean, listen. you know, the difference ultimately was that they didn't really hit because the pitching was really strong during the entire tournament.
Who would have thought?
Pregame,
Who would have thought that it was the pitching that we'd be sitting here talking about?
honestly, and listen, I mean, there's stuff on the horizon. I mean, Jonah Tong hopefully will be around in 2029. Cade Smith will hopefully be around in 2029. I mean, if you really want to dig deep, Brennan Lawson could be a difference maker in 2029. This is a team, as much as the day after it doesn't feel that way. This is a team really on the rise. I mean, Owen Casey is going to make his, basically big league debut for all intents and purposes this season. 3 years from now, this guy may be a productive big leaguer, could even be an all-star. And Denzel Clark, the same goes for him. He's only going to get better. Like there's so much more talent in the pipeline than I think even in 2023, where it was so much of a transition year, that this is a Canada team that has now shown we can get out of our group. And it really does feel like they are going to enter the next tier of talent at this tournament.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I think too, I mean, even you take like this game as a small example, right? Like Otto Lopez 2 for 5, Bo Naylor 2 for 4 with that big home run. Tyler Black comes through with his first hit of the tournament and an RBI single. Micah Ashman goes 2 1/3 scoreless with 2 Ks. Mako goes an inning and 2/3 with 2 Ks. Tugboat, as we talked about, two scoreless, no hits, 2 Ks, like just electric stuff from some of the younger guys on this team against this USA roster. And say the World Baseball Classic, whether it rolls around in 2029 or 2030, like now those are guys who have experience on this stage, and you're gonna want them out there representing your country once again next time. And I would, if I were to guess, Canada probably finds itself in the same pool as the US, again in that edition. So it's going to be, these guys who are going to be the ones that you're going to want to rely on, and the ones that you're going to want to roll back out there. Before we kind of move on to kind of some more forward looking stuff. I do just kind of for this game. I mean, Soroka, we talked about going in, that you were hoping to kind of see him get deeper in, and I actually thought that he pitched better than the line showed. As we said, he kind of limited the hard contact, kept the ball within, in front of Canada's defense, I guess, if you will. And there was just kind of like some defensive lapses, I think, throughout the game. Naylor a couple times was just kind of wandering away from first base. Obviously, in the first inning, the first run that they score is on a ground ball to Josh Naylor, and it just goes off his glove and right to Edouard Julien. And, you know, like it's just kind of tough the way that some of the bounces went for them defensively, and especially behind Soroka.
I mean, it's a moot point, but this team was really missing Freddie Freeman.
Yeah.
I mean, Josh Naylor was like supposed to be the star who was promised, and just a tough, tough tournament for him for sure.
Yeah, I know they said, I think it was Shy wrote, he wasn't the same after he got hit by pitch, or got hit on the elbow there. I was actually surprised that they brought him back in to play defense, because obviously he had the dropped ball in the Panama loss that cost them, and then he DH'd against Puerto Rico and Cuba, and then for this one, they line up Tyler Black as the DH. I figured that maybe Black would be the guy playing first, and Naylor would be DHing. Naylor obviously said that he wasn't limited by the hit by pitch, but I kind of wonder what the truth would be there, because that looked like nothing like the guy that we saw playing for Seattle in the ALCS and the playoffs and down the stretch last year.
I mean, he had even said there was a quote floating around that, we're all banged up, it's March, we're all getting our, and it's like, brother, are we
We're
all?
all
It's the season is not even started yet. I mean, I don't know if that's the case.
we're
So
all feeling it a little bit after 5 games. Like,
a little
I
bit
mean,
indicative maybe of how it was going for him.
I have a tough time like going in too hard on these guys because one, it's such a small sample size, right? Like it's 5 games. Like, if you've played baseball and you haven't had a bad 5 game stretch, then you're a liar. And they were the ones that were there and playing, right? Obviously, there's a storyline along this Canadian team of guys who weren't there, and again, not going to criticize them for prioritizing their major league careers or their family situations or whatever it may be, but I'm not going to sit here and like totally bash these guys who did make the sacrifice to be there and go to Puerto Rico and play in these games.
Yeah, and we had talked about it as well, in the lead up to it as well, that it was going to be tough to get guys to commit because it was in Puerto Rico. So,
Yeah.
it's a bit of a kind of give and take. You avoided the US at the end of the day and you're able to advance to the quarterfinal and, you know, unfortunately you meet your maker when you finally do have the chance to face off against the United States, but at the same time, you make it as far as you've ever made it in this tournament, right? So it will see exactly when the next WBC is and how Canada ultimately is able to line up and who in their group and all the various machinations to come. But at the end of the day, I think there's a sense of kind of bittersweetness for
Yeah.
this one. It's a real pleasure. This last playoff baseball in March was about as fun as it's gotten. Um, I mean, I had a blast with it. I know you've had a blast with it, and I mean, I'm sure we'll be keeping an eye on Vladdy and hopefully his vengeance for Team Canada to come. But yeah, I mean, it's just a shame that it ends, blink of an eye.
Yeah. Yeah, with what I said as well, though, it would have been nice to have gotten, bigger performances from Josh Naylor and Tyler O'Neill in this tournament, who both end up with OPSs below 600 in the 5 games. So, kind of tough from that perspective, but just kind of looking, I mean, at the whole picture here, I kind of wonder for you, like, who or what was like the most surprising thing for this Canadian team throughout this 5 game stretch that we saw them.
I got to give more love to Owen Casey. This
Yeah,
guy has pretty firmly, placed himself in the kind of heart of the order discussion for Canada for years to come, I think, until further notice. This is a guy that has pop like basically nobody else on the Canadian roster, it feels like. And, we were talking about Eddie Julian in the same way heading out of 2023. And obviously, we know what transpired in the years to come. So there's nothing guaranteed. But Owen Casey looks the part of a slugging corner outfielder and will
yeah,
no doubt be an integral part of whatever the best iteration of Canada's lineup is into the 2030s.
yeah. I mean, just so cool to see him kind of arrive on the international stage and be that guy. I think you can certainly, if he's willing to suit up, you'll put him in the lineup for any tournament. One thing that'll be interesting to find out tonight is whether Canada, did enough to kind of secure an Olympic spot. From my initial math, if Puerto Rico loses and Venezuela loses tonight, I think Canada has a good chance of getting in. It obviously comes down to the run differential quotient as a tiebreaker again for that, where I believe, based on what I've read, that Canada holds the tiebreaker over Puerto Rico because they beat them during the pool stage, and then it would come down to Canada versus Venezuela, and Canada so far had allowed less runs before the U.S. game. So we'll see kind of how Venezuela fares against Japan. If either of those teams win, then obviously Canada is not going to make the Olympics, but certainly worth monitoring. And I mean, could you imagine if they ended up in the 2028 Olympic Games? Because realistically, you kind of look at the teams that are going to be there, and it would be the U.S., the Dominican, Canada in this scenario, Japan, and then probably like a Korea and maybe like one of these other I guess they would be a European country or something like that. So it would be interesting. I mean, you'd kind of be maybe not a favorite to come out with like a medal there, but like a bronze medal game type scenario wouldn't be out of the question.
I mean, we're looking at Venezuela, Japan, and Italy, Puerto Rico here.
Yeah,
So, I mean, I would say that, especially in the Italy one, I mean, that's a 50-50 toss up, and then I'd
yeah,
say Japan is probably the favorite there. It's not impossible, not impossible by any stretch.
yeah. It'll be yeah, worth following, worth seeing because Canada at the Olympics with some of these big leaguers, we talked about going forward the World Baseball Classic, like looking at some of these guys, like I mean, just kind of the potential future of this team. I mean, if we're kind of sitting here dreaming about what the next iteration of this Canadian team can be. Obviously, you're thinking Jonah Tong, you're thinking, maybe Nick Pivetta, if he's sticking around by 2030, I could certainly see him playing kind of like a James Paxton role in that next WBC. Offensively, you mentioned Brendan Lawson, some of the top prospects coming up too. You think of Tim Piazentine with the Blue Jays, Nathan Fluelling with the Tampa Bay Rays behind the plate. Like there is so much kind of potential and obviously, I don't even really think that like there's anybody who was on this year's team that would really be aging out of being able to play in that 2030 or 2029 WBC.
Yeah, certainly not on the hitting front. On the pitching front, I don't know if Philip will
Sorry,
get
yes,
another run.
yeah. I mean, he's pitched in all six so far, so um or maybe not all six, but he's they keep running him out there. So you never know. Paxton, I mean, it's too bad that he won't be drawn out of retirement. It's too bad that we didn't see him against the US there because that would have been a fun story. But I mean, kind of for you, like looking ahead to the next Canadian roster, like who from this year's team that maybe, wasn't kind of front and center coming in is now front and center in that conversation for you other than Owen Casey.
I mean, I look at Otto Lopez. I mean, he ended up leading off.
Yeah.
I think we talked about him as a guy that we could have seen leading off by the end of the tournament. He certainly seems like a guy. There's no heir apparent, I think, at the shortstop position. And, you know, Otto
Yeah,
Lopez, sneaky
like
young,
Lawson
too.
Lawson's playing shortstop for Florida right now, but I don't know if his future is at short.
Probably more of a, like, he's a big boy. But Otto Lopez, only 27 years old, like sneaky young. Uh, Depending on when the tournament happens, maybe on the right side of 30 even for the next time around. Like, to me, seems like very clearly a guy that is on the upswing, that is ascending for Team Canada. I look at him, Abraham Toro had a huge tournament. He seems like a guy that could, I mean, if you want to talk about where Lawson fits in,
Yeah.
certainly would seem like a decent spot there. But, the way that he played this tournament certainly has received the benefit of the doubt, and especially if he's still a big leaguer this time, next time around. And I think it was because we talked about how it wasn't the stars that did the heavy lifting. It was
Yeah.
the unsung hero, so to speak, that did the most damage. I mean, Bo Naylor as well outshined his brother in a couple of respects, right? So, that's how this team kind of rolled. They were able to get contributions on the hitting side from kind of a little bit of everywhere, and then on the pitching front, they really kind of showed something that I don't think that we saw
Yeah.
coming,
Yeah.
which is going to make things super fascinating, I think, moving forward. Because if this is, if they've found a group here of guys that can pick up big key outs, it suddenly becomes a real, like, legitimate contending team. It feels like because they've had hitting before. I don't know if they've ever really had pitching like this.
No, no, it's funny because in that 2030 classic, like you could make a reasonable case that their pitching might be kind of the calling card instead of the bats, which have kind of generally been the number one thing for this Canadian team. And I think of a guy like Jordan Blazovic who is really impressive. Like he's only 27, can certainly see him back. We talked about Mako, Wilkinson, Ashman. Eric Sarantola was good. Michael Soroka will still be around by the next time this tournament comes around. Jameson Tyone certainly kind of in that mix. Antoine Jean, Noah Skiro, Rob Zastryzny, kind of guys like that. You can kind of see them all being around, and then even beyond that, I think like Tyler Bremner's a guy who said that he wants to play for Team Canada, the second overall pick in this year's draft. And Mitch Brady pitched in 2023 but couldn't this year. Garrett Hawkins, reliever in the Padres system, who was like an MILB all-star last year and set a record with like a scoreless streak. Like, so they're certainly pitching on the way. Even like a Sean Duncan who's set to kind of be a top 2 round pick in this summer's draft. If he's able to climb the rankings quickly, could there be a spot for a guy like that? And then even, just kind of swapping back to the position player side, you're gonna want to hope that some of these other guys kind of break out, right? Whether it's a Fluelling, whether it's like a Charles Davalon, even if you're thinking Blue Jays, Sam Shaw, could he be a guy that plays his way into this mix? Like, there's
I
just
mean, could they poach like a Dante Nori even? You think
well,
of
that would
that,
be
right?
that would be pretty sweet if they if they grab Nori. Obviously, he's playing pretty well for the Italians, but just just having like kind of that depth is super cool and super interesting. Obviously, at this time, or yeah, probably around this time last year when we were kind of recording our episode, that was projecting this lineup. Obviously, we're sitting there, Pavetta, Tong, Sabrowski, Smith, and kind of all these different guys that didn't end up suiting up. So you never know.
Jordan Romano, another
Jordan
guy.
Romano. So you never know kind of exactly how it is going to go, but certainly kind of there's the pipeline there to give you hope that there is talent on the way.
Yeah, this is the Canadian team on the upswing, heading into, if you'll allow me to borrow from another international sport, their golden generation could be on the horizon.
Fingers crossed. It would be fun. Before we kind of run, I mean, I think the game, obviously kind of plays out the way that it does, but any specific like standouts that you want to highlight before we get out of here, or I think that we kind of did talk through a lot of these guys, and obviously, we recorded after every game, but was very fun to follow along.
Yeah, and I think just we kind of said before, the pitching staff just deserves all kinds of flowers. Even, this game against the United States, to be able to hold them to 5 runs and to basically keep them in check, save for a couple misplays here and there. And, it really was the margins at the end of the day. And they had said on the broadcast that Francisco Cervelli and the Italian team had basically said that they can't make mistakes. And if they can win on the margins, they've got a shot. And, it ultimately came down to that for Canada as well.
Yeah. Well, a fun tournament for this Canadian team. It's too bad that it comes and goes so quick, but such is life in international baseball and tournament baseball. So, thanks for sticking with us throughout the tournament and listening along. Was a lot of fun to kind of ramp up the playoff gear once again here in March, and kind of stick along and live with every moment throughout the tournament. So, was a lot of fun for us, and I appreciate anybody for tuning into any of our listeners, and appreciate Ian Finlayson and Scott Crawford for hopping on for a couple of our post game episodes. We will be back sometime next week as we kind of shift back into spring training mode and lock in on this Blue Jays team headed for 2026. But that is going to do it for us here today at the Bird's Eye View podcast. Make sure to hit the subscribe and like buttons if you're watching on YouTube. And if you're listening along on the audio provider of your choice, make sure to drop a follow and review. You can follow us all on Twitter. I am at Worden_Zach. Jori is at J Negin-Shecter. And the pod is at BED_pod. Thank you so much for listening.